Good morning, my friends. So glad to worship with you guys today. It's a special testimony weekend at the end of our Daniel sermon series. So if you would, why don't you rise and let's sing to the Lord a song this morning, and let's just tell him how much we love him.
Song we could ever sing, worthy of all the praise we could ever bring, worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We'll live for you. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. We live for you. And holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder. Show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around. Worthy of every song we could ever sing. Worthy of all the praise we could ever bring. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Oh, we live for you. Holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder. Show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around. And holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder. Show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. And I will build my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation, and I will put my trust in you alone, and I will not be shaken, and I will build my life upon your love. It God, that's our prayer this morning, that we would build our lives upon you and who you are, your love, your grace, your forgiveness. That our lives would be built on that we wouldn't build our lives on things that are moving, that change, that let us down. Family or job or money or status or whatever it may be. Those will all let us down. Those will all crumble and fall. But help us to be people that build our life on you, because you are worthy of every song that we could sing. You're worthy then of all the praise that we can give you this morning and through our lives. Worthy of every breath that we breathe. Help us to live lives that are worthy of you. That's our prayer this morning. Amen. You guys can have a seat.
Good morning. My name is Brian. I volunteered to come and share how some of Daniel affected me. But for me, the sermon on Daniel 9 and prayer pierced my heart, and it still hurts. I didn't really get the way that Daniel lumped himself in with his ancestors who were so bad that the land vomited them out. You know, he says, "To you, O Lord, belongs righteousness, but to us open shame. As at this day to the men of Judah, to the inhabitants of Jerusalem, and to all Israel." And he just goes on about that. But following our discussion in community group, I decided to pray seriously, wholeheartedly the next morning. Prayed for my family, for our home, and everything that goes on in it. I prayed in my home office and all the business that I conduct. I prayed that it would be used to honor God and strengthen his kingdom. I prayed that it would be filled with his spirit. And I want to warn you about doing that. It's a little tongue-in-cheek, but that day wasn't a happily burbling brook. Traffic didn't flow smoothly. The idiot drivers didn't stay at home. But the worst part was that since God had poured out his spirit on me, I could see the contrast between my selfish and entitled spirit and his loving and selfless spirit. And it wasn't just in traffic. Yeah, it was at home. I could see it, how my spirit there at home and in my business and my marriage, I saw how starkly I avoided dealing with difficult issues with my children or my business, or how I behaved like Nebuchadnezzar by threatening or trying to control things that weren't in my control. So this is a warning. God doesn't answer prayer like children play house. He knows what it takes to cleanse us from all unrighteousness. When I prayed for him to make my home and business holy, he answered, starting with opening my eyes to seeing the ways in my heart that were opposed to him. The book of Daniel started out with Daniel and his friends being marched out of Israel in a brutal realization that God was deadly serious about dealing with sin. Early on, Daniel and his friends saw God's favor when they sought to honor him even in what they ate. And later on in life, Daniel hadn't forgotten that God was serious about all of this. And Daniel saw what would come in the end, the salvation that we have, that sin does not need to rule anymore. And, as we pray for God to be the foundation of our lives, it's not just happy, because there's stuff that he's dealing with. My prayers since that morning have been kind of half-hearted. God, help me pray that way again. Help me be serious about what's serious to you. And Yeah, he is continuing to stir up my heart. So Daniel 9 pierced my heart, and it's still stuck there.
DuPont campus, and I wanted to share with you a little bit about what the kids have been learning while the adults have been working on Daniel. We have been working super hard at learning all the books of the Old Testament and working in our hearts to develop a sense of a servant's heart. Once a month, we devote our entire Sunday school time to doing a service outreach project. This year in January, we made Valentines to deliver to veterans' homes. In February, we put together birthday boxes so that foster families can throw a fabulous birthday party for a foster kid that they are loving in their family. In March, Laura Scott came and talked to us a little bit about the missions that are happening in Honduras that our church supports, and then we wrote letters of encouragement to those missionaries. And today, right now, while you're watching this, the kids and I are meeting with Laura Christensen to share about the 6K, the water 6K that's happening through the World Vision Organization on May 22nd. And our kiddos are making posters because our church gets to host one of these water 6Ks, and so the kids are going to help decorate the starting line. So as we go through all spring, we've really looked for ways for kids to reach out, be part of their community, and develop that servant's heart.
Welcome to Wrap Up Sunday. So we heard from Miss Linda about our kid worship ages, 1st through 5th grade. Now let's talk about our pre-K, 3 to 5 years old. There was this concept that we really wanted to get with them, and that was celebrating Jesus' birthday. Now, yes, we know that's about Christmas, right? No, this was so cool because we got to see the little lights come on, that these little kids understand what a birthday is, and that every year we get to celebrate Jesus' birthday and his coming and on Easter we got to see that his resurrection, he is risen. It's such great concept that we get to teach with these kids. Now every week we come with a curriculum that is very easy and very adaptable to each teacher and helper and all of these kids, that they get to go home with just maybe a little snippet of what Jesus has for them, and to be able to pray on them and worship with them along with our nursery children. It's been so nice, and having full classrooms again has been so wonderful. We have also been very excited that we get 2 services now because our numbers are just fantastic, and God has blessed us immensely with that comes with some responsibilities that we need more volunteers. Now, I am usually the one advocating for more volunteers. I'm the one having those conversations, and sometimes I get the little, oh my goodness, let's not look. But you know what? God has made it so apparent to me that having volunteers and having teachers that are really passionate for these kids has been so important, that the curriculum and all of the things that you teach has been very simple. It's been put into a packet. You just come on in and you get to teach, and it's been so wonderful. If you are interested in serving with us, that would be amazing. And just get in contact with me or Miss Linda, and we would love to have you guys join our team. All right, have a great wrap-up Sunday.
Hi, I'm Dave, one of the pastors here at the GraceWorks. Welcome to Wrap Up Sunday. We're super glad that you are here. And I just have a couple of announcements. And the main one is, if I can find the little card, we would love for people who are not connected yet to get connected with Realm. There's a little card in the hallway that looks like this. There's some information on the back, and what's really important about this card is an email address on the bottom of this card, where if you email that and request a login on Realm, you can find out all sorts of information as far as community groups and events and things that are happening at this church. For instance, information about the Global 6K, information about the community garden, which is going to be starting up here in a little bit, information about softball, which is also going to be starting up here in a little bit as well. So that is the place that we try to find or put all of the information that you need to know to be an active participant in this fellowship of believers. So we would love to get you connected with that. It's time for us to dismiss our kids so they can head out to kids' church, get our grade schoolers out that way, and preschool and nursery out that way, and we'll get back into this service in just a couple minutes.
Set right after Babylon's first attack on Jerusalem, and they had plundered the city and its temple and taken a wave of Israelites into exile. Among them were 4 men from the royal family of David: Daniel, who's later named Belteshazzar, and his 3 friends who you probably know by their Babylonian names, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. This book tells of their struggles to maintain hope in the land of their conquerors. The book's design seems pretty simple at first. Chapters 1 through 6 contain stories about Daniel and his friends in Babylon, while chapters 7 through 12 contain the visions of Daniel about the future. But this 2-part shape is made even more interesting by another design feature, and that's the book's language. It begins in Hebrew, the language of the Israelites, but chapters 2 through 7 are written in Aramaic, a cousin language to Hebrew spoken widely among the ancient empires. But then in chapters 8 through 12, it goes back to Hebrew. This design shows how chapters 2 through 7 are a coherent section, but it also highlights the importance of chapters 2 and 7 for understanding the later chapters of the book. Let's just dive in. Chapter 1 introduces the basic tension of the first half of the book. Daniel and his friends, they're really wise and capable, and they're recruited to serve in the royal palace of Babylon. But they're pressured to give up their Jewish identity by living and eating like Babylonians and violating the Jewish food laws found in the Torah. So they refuse, and they choose faithfulness to the Torah, and it puts them in danger. But God delivers them, and they end up being elevated by the king of Babylon. After this begins the Aramaic section, which you'll see has this really cool symmetrical design. So first, the king of Babylon has a dream that, it turns out, only Daniel is able to interpret. It's about a huge statue made of 4 types of metal, and it symbolizes a sequence of kingdoms, and the head is Babylon. But then a huge rock comes flying in, and it shatters the statue, and it becomes this huge mountain. Now, this dream is the first of many symbolic visions in the book, and this one introduces the basic storyline of them all. Daniel says that the statue represents a train of human kingdoms following from Babylon, and they will all fill God's world with violence. But one day, God's kingdom will come and will confront and humble the arrogant kingdoms of this world and fill the world with the healing justice of God's reign and rule. After this, chapter 3 tells the famous story of Daniel's 3 friends who refused to bow down and worship a huge idol statue, which, like the statue in chapter 2, represents the king and his imperial power. And so the friends are persecuted. They're thrown into a fiery furnace, but God delivers them from death, and they're exalted by the king, who now acknowledges their God as the true one. After this come a pair of stories about 2 Babylonian kings, the father, Nebuchadnezzar, and then his son, Belshazzar. They're both filled with pride because of their imperial power. And so, like in chapter 2, God warns them both through dreams and then visions, which, also like chapter 2, only Daniel can interpret. He says that both kings are to humble themselves before God, and both kings arrogantly resist. So Nebuchadnezzar is stricken with madness. He becomes like a beast in the field. But then he humbles himself before God, and his humanity returns to him. He's restored as king. This is in contrast with his son, Belshazzar, who doesn't humble himself before God, and he's assassinated that very night. Now, these 2 stories draw this imagery from Genesis chapters 1 and 2 and Psalm 8, where humans are depicted as the royal image of God. He's given them authority to rule over the beasts of the field and the birds of the air on behalf of God, who is the world's true king. But when human kingdoms forget that, when they rebel and make themselves and their power into a god, they become less than human, like violent beasts who will face God's justice. Which brings us to chapter 6, the pair of chapter 3. And this time it's Daniel who's being persecuted because he refuses to pray and worship the king as a god. And so, like the friends, he's sentenced to death and he's thrown into a lion's den. But God delivers him from the beasts, and like the friends, the king exalts Daniel and praises his God, which brings us to chapter 7. It's the pair of chapter 2 and the center of the book where all its themes come together. It's another dream, but it's Daniel's this time. And ironically, he can't understand the dream until an angelic messenger explains it to him. He sees a series of 4 beasts, one like a lion, then like a bear, then one like a winged leopard, each of these symbolizing an arrogant kingdom. And last of all is a super beast, identified as a really evil empire. And it has lots of horns, a common symbol for kings in the Old Testament. And there's one specific horn who is an image of an arrogant king who exalts himself above God and persecutes God's people. Now they are symbolized by a figure called the Son of Man, who's an image for both God's covenant people, but also for their king from the line of David. But then all of a sudden, God, who's called the Ancient of Days, comes and he sets up his throne. He destroys the super beast and he exalts the Son of Man on the clouds, where he comes up to sit at God's right hand and share in God's rule over the nations. We can look back now and see how all of these stories in the first half fit together. The 3 stories of faithfulness despite persecution. These are meant to offer hope to God's suffering people among the nations. But they suffer because human kingdoms have rebelled against God and have become beasts. And so these visions encourage patience, that God's people are to wait for him to bring his kingdom and rule over our world and vindicate his suffering people. But it raises the question about when God is going to do that, and that's what these final 3 visions set out to explore. In chapter 8, Daniel has another vision about the final 2 beasts of chapter 7, but this time they're symbolized by a ram, who we're told is the image of the empire of the Medes and Persians, and then by a goat, who's an image of ancient Greece. And out of the goat come a whole bunch of horns, one of which symbolizes the evil king from chapter 7. And we're told more about him, that he will attack Jerusalem and exalt himself above God and defile the temple with idols. However, in the end, he will be destroyed by God, who will exalt his people and his kingdom. Now, by chapter 9, Daniel is very puzzled, especially as to when all of this is going to take place. And so he consults the scroll of the prophet Jeremiah, where God said that Israel's exile would only last 70 years. So for Daniel, the 70 years is almost up. And so he asks God to fulfill his promise soon. But an angel comes and informs him that Israel's sin and rebellion has continued. And so their time of exile and oppression will continue on 7 times longer than Jeremiah envisioned. Daniel is deeply disturbed by this, and he has one final vision. We're shown the same sequence of kingdoms. It's Persia, then Greece, and Alexander the Great, followed by lesser kings, all leading up to this final king of the north, who will invade Jerusalem, set up idols in the temple, and exalt himself above God. But then, all of a sudden, this king comes to ruin. Now, there's been endless debate about what all of these visions refer to. Many see a clear connection to the exploits of the Syrian king Antiochus in the 160s BC. He killed many faithful Jews in Jerusalem and set up idols in the temple. Others think it points forward to the Roman Empire's role in the execution of Jesus and the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple in AD 70. And still others think it will be fulfilled in future events that have yet to happen when Jesus will return. Now the problem is that the symbols and the numbers, they don't quite match any of these views perfectly. But it opens up the possibility that in a sense, they are all right. The book of Daniel has been designed to offer hope to all future generations of God's people. It did so in the days of Antiochus' empire, and it has ever since. This is why Jesus could use imagery from Daniel to describe and confront the oppressive leaders he confronted in Jerusalem. This is why John, the visionary who wrote the Revelation, could adapt Daniel's visions and apply them to Rome of his day and also all future oppressive empires. And so the point of Daniel is that all generations of readers can find here a pattern and a promise. It's a pattern that human beings and their kingdoms become violent beasts when they glorify their own power, when they redefine right and wrong and don't acknowledge God as their true king. But Daniel also holds out a promise that one day God will confront the beast. He will rescue his world and his people by bringing his kingdom over all nations. And so for every generation, this book speaks a message of hope that should motivate faithfulness. And that's what the book of Daniel is all about.
Good morning. I'm Laura Scott, if I haven't had a chance to meet you yet. And I would like to talk to you about my heart for Daniel chapter 12, verse 2. And many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, some to shame and everlasting contempt. So this verse really struck me. It's short, but it's huge. They only give me 3 minutes, but you could really spend days on this. I won't. Life. What does life mean? It's freedom. It's the presence of God. It's our connection to God. 2 Corinthians chapter 3 says that where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. And that is our life as believers. Shame. Shame is a painful feeling of humiliation or distress, and contempt is worthlessness. And everlasting is forever. Forever. And we live in a fallen world. I'm sure that all of you have at some point in your life experienced shame and contempt. And we know what this feels like on some level. And the enemy tells us that we can escape these things. We can find freedom in our jobs, in finances, in alcohol, in pornography, in power over other people. But none of these things brings lasting freedom, and a lot of them perpetuate a shame cycle in our life. They are not the way God made us to live. But praise God, through Jesus Christ, he did make a way for us to have freedom with him forever. And while we are on this earth, we have a choice. We've been given the choice in how to live. We are eternal beings, and we can choose a life of freedom and connectedness to God forever, or we can choose a life of shame or contempt. And the time to decide is now. You don't know how much time you have. The kingdom of God is coming, and even if it's not coming in the next day, you don't know how much time you truly have. And God has given us all a gift. Now, for believers who have already made that choice, you know this taste of freedom. You know the glimpse of heaven that God has given us on earth. In 2 Peter 1 Peter, chapter 2, verse 9. You are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, his own special people, that you may proclaim the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. Now that you know the feeling of being called out of darkness, why would you want to allow anyone to spend the rest of their life in shame or contempt, the rest of eternity? So tell everyone you know about the light that you have living inside you, and bring everybody you can along to this freedom. It's not hard to do. You just do it in your daily life. You do it in your daily conversations. When Pastor Kevin calls you and says, can you come share about what God is doing in your life at Wrap Up Sunday? Say yes. It encourages everyone around you, and you don't know whose heart you are going to change for eternity. So, thank you.
Let's stand and worship.
Tom Rylander. My wife, Julie, and daughter Sophie are in the kids' room. I know we are in the book of Daniel, but at home we have kind of been writing and living our own book of Job. So I just want to say thank you to my wife and daughter, not in the room right now, all of our pastors, the congregation, some very good friends from church who have made the last 5 months a little bit better than it might look actually on paper if I were to publish that book. But we are in Daniel. Show of hands. The Sound of Music is a really good movie. Show of hands, Sound of Music, best movie ever. Ooh. Oh, well, maybe I should come to the 11 o'clock show. So here's the reason why it's the best movie ever to me. Because I remember when I was this big, it was February 1976, the first time it was ever aired on national television, and I could not take my eyes off the screen, and I could not wait. I assumed the very next year, at that exact time, it would come on, so I wrote it down on what was then probably something that predated a 3M Post-it note, and I couldn't wait for the next year. Because I wanted to be, like every kid, I wanted to be a Von Trapp kid. Okay, I wanted to escape under the cover of darkness from Nazism. I wanted to climb over the Alps with my family, albeit with no provisions and in the wrong direction, to eventually make it to Stowe, Vermont, and open up a little lodge near a ski area, which is kind of how it happened, but not really. I wanted to be in that family. The other reason why I like that movie so much, and this is indicative of a lot of movies from that era, you can go play a round of golf or take a short vacation and come back and still be there in time for the finish, right? The best finish ever. It's that long a movie, but that's the good thing about it. You can leave and come back. Now consider Daniel. We've been in Daniel since December 27th. That's the length of a semester, an entire semester. So you could have showed up on day one, grabbed the syllabus, left a tape recorder or a stenographer, come back 4 months later for the final exam, the best part of the class, right? You wouldn't have had to do that much homework. I promise you I missed maybe one class since December 27th, virtual or in person. But I made it for what I think, I made it in time for what I think, well, it was my favorite class. End of March, we talked about the different postures, the 9 different postures, and why they are so important. So I did make that class, and I wanted to share some of that with us. And again, it's been a really trying time in the Rylander household since November 18th, if you want an exact date. And there are two postures that struck me as very fitting and very timely for a household, and it might actually be for you. Patiently trust that God will end things at the right time. That's one posture, right? And endure to the end, knowing that it is worth it. And during these last 5 months, I can pat myself on the back, I can pat my family on the back, because we never said anything but, well, there's going to be a light at the end of the tunnel. And just now, recently this week, maybe today, I can sense that there's a light. I can't see it, but I know it's out there, and I've had a lot of friends tell me that. So patiently trust that God will end things at the right time and endure to the end, knowing that it is worth it. 2 very important postures. Now, that's easier said than done when you're crawling from room to room. Your back pain is such that nothing makes it go away. But what's the alternative to those 2 postures? You don't really even want to consider that. As Winston Churchill said, if you're going through hell, what do? Keep going. As Rodney Atkins sings, if you're going through hell, keep on going, and you might get out before the devil even knows you're there. So if you stop and think of in any other way other than there's a light at this end of the tunnel, well, that's when the devil's going to get you. Okay, so there's really no alternative. So endure we must, or rather endure we want to, no matter what our personal circumstances and no matter how tall those mountains in front of us might be, because the reward, as we know, is sweet. and it's worthy of being declared the best finish ever. Thank you guys very, very much. I appreciate your time.
Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Alrighty, hi, my name's Abby, and one of the things that really struck me about the book of Daniel was its impactfulness. 1,000 or more years later, we're still trying to figure out what it means and what it's meant for the past and what it means for the future. And I think the reason why Daniel was able to experience this prophecy and vision and interpret all these prophecies and visions was because of his close and personal relationship with God. If you didn't know, I have the great honor and privilege of being a lead teacher in the preschool and nursery classrooms, which means that most weeks I'm able to teach the lesson and lead the craft and be able to engage and play with them, and it is so wonderful. I love it so much. One of the things that I have tried to focus on recently has been how we talk about and how we talk to God. Oh, goodness. Whoa, nerves. So the way that we describe God is not only this great and omniscient God who knows everything, but it's also your best friend. And I think that that's sometimes easier to grasp for little minds. It's someone who loves you so much and who will never stop loving you. We also talk to God not as closed hands and folded eyes and the same prayer, but it's however you focus best on God, and it's however, we're able to communicate with him and how that works best for you. And I think that individualized and personal, up-close relationship with him, teaching it has been really powerful for me because I've been able to come to him in a more real and broken state and just really feel that connection with God as I've been trying to teach it to the preschool and nursery classrooms. I think that that's really important to grasp how close God wants to be to us, because as Daniel did for us, having a close relationship with the Lord is how we do really great and impactful things for his kingdom.
Let's go ahead and stand and worship again.
Well, I've heard 1,000 stories of what they think you're like, but I've heard the tender whispers of love in the dead of night, 'cause you tell that you're pleased and that I'm never alone. You're a good, good Father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are. And I'm loved by you. It's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am. Well, I've seen many searching for far and wide, but I know speak a peace so unexplainable. I can hardly think as you call me, deeper still as you call me, deeper still as you call me, deeper still in the love, love, love. Good Father, it's who you are, it's who you are, it's who you are, and I'm loved by you. It's who I am, it's who I am, it's who I am. You're a good, good Father. It's who you are, it's who you are, it's who you are, and I'm loved by you. It's who I am, it's who I am, it's who I am. You're perfect, you are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways to us. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways to us. You're perfect. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways to us.
My name is Noel, and I'm going to share a little bit about Daniel. It's nice to be able to take the mask off, and despite the sacrifice of mask beard, the risk of mask beard. All right, so let me find my notes here, make sure I'm ready. All right, so I'm hoping this little message demonstrates a good father, right? Him. More nerves than anything here. Anyway, so I've been reading this book, right? God prepares the path before us, right? When we're leaning into His power, leaning into His purpose, He prepares that way, right? For you to step into. So anyway, a couple quotes from this book. Read it a few years ago, called the Weapon of Prayer. And one of them says, E.M. Bounds wrote it, the progress of consummation of God's work in this world has two basic principles: God's ability to give and man's ability to ask. The hands are symbols of supplication. Outstretched hands stand for an appeal for help, just like we see in the poor and many other things. It is the silent yet eloquent attitude of the helpless soul standing before God, appealing for mercy and grace. So in Daniel, we saw in verse 10 just the immense power and attention God can give for a pleading heart, a heart that's willing to be part of, wanting to be part of God's will. He said to me in chapter 10, verse 11 and 12, he said to me, Daniel, you are of great value. Understand the words that I am about to speak to you. So stand up, for I have now been sent to you. when he said this to me, I stood up shaking, like me. Then he said to me, "Don't be afraid, Daniel. From very first day, you applied your mind to understand and to humble yourself before God. Your words were heard. I have come in response to your words." We've heard and read of Daniel's practices to find God's favor. The weapon of prayer needs preparation of the heart. But it seems the more you practice, the easier the process becomes. So just a quick summary of that. We're called to be a community of prayer for each other. James 5:16 says, "So confess your sins to one another and pray for one another so that you may be healed." The prayer of a righteous person has a great effectiveness.
Thanks, Don. Thanks to all of you who shared today. I think that a theme that I heard constantly throughout the day is just the personal nature of our God and the relationship aspect of Daniel. What a beautiful thing to see a man that from the time he was young prayed like the world depended on it, prayed like the spiritual depended on it, and he didn't stop. And the older he got, it seems like he was more faithful in his prayers. And my challenge is that hopefully each of us will be that way as we live in exile. He was exiled in a foreign land, and so are we. We're aliens and strangers right now. And yet we have a Father who lets us approach the throne of grace because of what Jesus Christ did on the cross. So day by day, let us be a people of prayer. Let us be a people who don't act defeated, but act like God does. Hear our prayer and say to you, you're valued and you're loved, and I hear you, and I answer prayers. Let's sing one more song together and just lift up the Lord. If you were new today, I hope you were blessed by just kind of a different service. And we're going to go through a vision series for a couple weeks here, and then we're going to jump into the book of Revelation. So we'll be seeing a lot of great parallels between the two books, and we're excited for that study. So just be excited for that and be prepared. Let's lift up the name of the Lord, though, as we sing day by day.
Future, today, race.
Amen. You guys are dismissed. Have a great rest of the weekend. God bless.